Now we come to 4.17.170. This is another important sutta. On a certain occasion, the Venerable Ananda was staying at Kosambi in Gosita Park. Then the Venerable Ananda addressed the monks, saying, "Reverend sirs," "Your Reverence," replied those monks to the Venerable Ananda. The Venerable Ananda said, "Reverend sirs, when anyone, be it monk or nun, proclaims in my presence that he has attained arahantship, all such do so by virtue of 4 factors, or one of these 4. What are they? Herein, Your Reverence, a monk develops vipassana, contemplation, preceded by samatha, tranquilization. In him thus developing contemplation preceded by tranquilization is born the way. He follows along that way, makes it grow, makes much of it. In him following, developing, making much of that way, the fetters are abandoned, the lurking tendencies come to an end. Or again, Your Reverences, a monk develops tranquilization preceded by contemplation. In him, developing tranquilization preceded by contemplation is born the way. He follows along that way, makes it grow, makes much of it. In him, following, developing, making much of that way, the fetters are abandoned, the lurking tendencies come to an end. Yet again, Your Reverences, a monk develops tranquilization and contemplation together or simultaneously. In him thus developing tranquilization and contemplation together, the way is born. He follows along that way, etc. As he does so, the fetters are abandoned, the lurking tendencies come to an end. Once more, Your Reverences, a monk's mind is utterly moved and taken up by Dhamma. That is the time, Your Reverences, when his mind stands fixed in the very self, or internally, settles down, becomes one-pointed, is composed. In him the way is born. He follows along that way, makes it grow, makes much of it. In him following, developing, making much of that way, the fetters are abandoned, the lurking tendencies come to an end. Indeed, Your Reverences, when anyone, be it monk or nun, proclaims in my presence that he has attained arahantship, all such do so by virtue of 4 factors, or one of these 4. And that's the end of the sutta. This sutta was spoken by the Venerable Ananda after the Buddha's passing away. Because when the Buddha was still alive, whenever the monks or nuns attained arahanthood, they would come and inform the Buddha that they had attained arahanthood. So because the Buddha had passed into parinibbana, and the Venerable Ananda was considered like a leader of the Sangha, and so they would come to the Venerable Ananda. The Venerable Ananda was supposed to have lived up to about 120, the age of 120. So monks and nuns, they would come and inform Venerable Ananda that they had attained arahanthood. And in this sutta, Venerable Ananda says that all of them, all the arahants, attain arahanthood by one of these 4 ways. These 4 ways. In other words, there are only these 4 ways to attain arahanthood. There is no other way to attain arahanthood. The first one is a person practices samatha first, followed by vipassana. The second one, he practices vipassana first, followed by samatha. The third one is samatha and vipassana together. The fourth one is a method of meditation which nowadays is seldom taught in Theravada Buddhism, but which has gone into Mahayana Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, and also Hinduism, Jnana Yoga, and that is contemplating on the self, contemplation on the self until the mind becomes one-pointed, which also means that's a samatha practice. And then after that, he follows along that way, and the asavas are destroyed. So these are the 4 ways to attain arahanthood. And in all these 4 ways, we find actually both samatha and vipassana are necessary. Samatha is tranquilization of the mind, and vipassana is the contemplation of the body and the mind, basically. If nowadays people say that samatha is not necessary, it is not the Buddha's teaching. If people say vipassana is not necessary, it's also not the Buddha's teaching. Both samatha and vipassana are clearly necessary in this sutta. Now we come to another important sutta. There's quite a lot of good important suttas here. 4.18.171. The Buddha said, "Monks, where there is bodily action, there arises to the self pleasure or pain caused by intention of bodily action. Or monks, where there is verbal action, there arises pleasure or pain to the self caused by intentional action of speech. Or monks, where there is mental action, there arises pleasure or pain to the self caused by intentional action of mind. Or it is due to ignorance. Monks, it is due to ignorance that either of himself one wills bodily intentions, falling on which arises to the self that pleasure or pain, or others will bodily intentions against him, falling on which arises to the self that pleasure or pain. Either deliberately, monks, one wills bodily intentions, falling on which arises to the self that pleasure or pain, or unwittingly does he will bodily intention. Either of himself, monks, one wills verbal intentions, falling on which arises to the self that pleasure or pain, or others will verbal intention against him, falling on which arises pleasure or pain. Either deliberately, monks, one wills verbal intentions, or unwittingly does he will verbal intentions. Again, monks, either of himself, one wills mental intentions, falling on which arises to the self that pleasure or pain, or others will mental intentions against him, falling on which arises pleasure or pain. Either deliberately, monks, one wills mental intentions, or unwittingly does he will mental intention. Monks, in these instances, ignorance is followed, but by the utter ceasing and ending of ignorance, that bodily intention exists not, falling on which that pleasure or pain arises to the self. That verbal intention, that mental intention exists not, falling on which that pleasure or pain arises to the self. There is no field, no base, no sphere of action, no occasion, falling on which that pleasure or pain arises to the self." This is one of the suttas about karma. And the Pali word here is kaya sankarang abhisankaroti, which means wills bodily intentions. The second one is vachi sankarang abhisankaroti, which means wills verbal intentions. The third one is mano sankarang abhisankaroti, which means wills mental intentions. And we note here that in all these instances of karma, the third one is mano sankarang, and it is not chitta sankara. In the paticca samuppada, dependent origination, the sankaras are mentioned as kaya sankara, vachi sankara, and chitta sankara. And there are two sets of sankaras we find in the suttas. One is kaya sankara, vachi sankara, mano sankara. The other one is kaya sankara, vachi sankara, and chitta sankara. And mano sankara is always used when it concerns karma, just like this sutta concerns karma, and we use mano sankara, the third one. Whereas in paticca samuppada, dependent origination, it is chitta sankara, and chitta sankara we find has to do not with karma but with cessation. If you are interested, you can look at my book Dependent Origination, and it explains the difference between these two sets of sankaras. And we find it towards the end that when ignorance is ended, with the ceasing and ending of ignorance, there is no more karma created. Now another sutta, 4.18.172. Monks, there are these 4 ways of getting personality. What for? There is, monks, the getting of personality in the getting of which one's own intention, not that of another person, has effect. There is that in the getting of which another person's intention has effect, not one's own. There is that in which both one's own and another's intention have effect. And there is that in which neither has effect. These make 4. When this was said, the Venerable Sariputta said this to the Exalted One. Of this Lord that has been uttered by the Exalted One in brief, I understand the meaning in detail. In the case where there is getting of personality in which one's own intention, not another's, has effect, there is disease for those beings from that group because of one's own intention. In the case where there is getting of personality in which another's intention, not one's own, has effect, there is disease for those beings from that group because of another's intention. In the case where there is getting of personality in which both have effect, there is disease for those beings from that group because of the intention both of oneself and of another. But Lord, in the case where there is getting of personality in which neither has effect, what sort of devas are to be regarded therein? And the Buddha said, in that case, Sariputta, it is the devas who have attained the realm in which is neither perception nor non-perception. And Sariputta said, pray Lord, what is the reason, what is the cause, why certain beings deceasing from that group are returners, who come back to this state of things? Again, Lord, what is the reason, what is the cause, why certain beings deceasing from that group are non-returners, who come not back to this state of things? And the Buddha said, in this first case, Sariputta, in a certain person, the fetters that bind to this world are not abandoned. Such a one, in this very life, attains the realm where there is neither perception nor non-perception, and abides therein. He enjoys its sweetness, longs for it, finds happiness therein, established therein, given thereto, generally spending his time therein, not falling away therefrom. When he makes an end, he is reborn in that company. When he deceases, thence he is a returner. He comes back to this state of things. In the other case, Sariputta, in a certain person, those fetters are abandoned. Such a one, in this very life, attains the realm where there is neither perception nor non-perception. He enjoys its sweetness, longs for it, etc. When he makes an end, he is reborn in that company. But deceasing thence, he is a non-returner. He comes not back to this state of things. This is the reason, this is the cause, Sariputta, why certain beings are non-returners, who come not back to this state of things. The thing about this sutta which I like to point out is that it is mentioned here that there are certain persons, because of their cultivation of the arupa jhana, the base of neither perception nor non-perception, and they abide in it constantly, and they enjoy that state and constantly spend their time in that state. When they pass away, they are reborn in that arupa jhana realm. But there are 2 types of person. One is he has destroyed those fetters, and he does not come back to the human world. Whereas there's another one who has not destroyed the fetters. He comes back to the human birth again. So from here you find the one that does not come back to the human realm again. He's a non-returner and anagami. So this is one of the few suttas which shows that an anagami can be reborn in the plane of neither perception nor non-perception. Usually, anagamis are reborn in the Suddhavasa abode, which is the 4th jhana plane. But in this sutta, it shows that they can also be reborn in the arupa jhana plane. Now we come to another sutta, which is also quite in fact, a very important sutta also. 4.18.174. The Venerable Kotita, the great Mahakotita, came to visit the Venerable Sariputta. On coming to him, he greeted him courteously, etc., etc., and sat down at one side. So seated, the Venerable Mahakotita said this to the Venerable Sariputta: Your Reverence, or avuso. Does anything at all exist after the passionless ending without remainder of the 6 spheres of contact? And Venerable Sariputta said, say not that, Your Reverence. And then Mahakotita, the Arahant, said, then, Your Reverence, not anything exists after the ending of the 6 spheres of contact. And Venerable Sariputta said, say not that, Your Reverence. And again Venerable Mahakotita said, then there both is and is not anything existing after the passionless ending without remainder of the 6 spheres of contact. And Venerable Sariputta said, say not that, Your Reverence. Then Venerable Mahakotita said, Your Reverence, when questioned thus, is there anything remaining, or is there not, or is there and is there not, or neither is there nor is there not anything existing after the ending of the 6 spheres of contact? You reply, say not that, Your Reverence. Pray then, how is the meaning of what I said to be regarded? And Venerable Sariputta said, Your Reverence, in saying that there is something left, one makes difficulty where there is none. In saying that there neither is nor is not anything left, one makes difficulty where there is none. So long, Your Reverence, as there is going to the 6 spheres of contact, for just so long is there a going to difficulty. But, Your Reverence, by the passionless ending without remainder of the 6 spheres of contact, there is calming down of difficulty. So I'll stop here on this particular sutta, but I'd like to say about this sutta, which is that this sutta is talking about the state of nibbana, After the ending of the 6 spheres of contact is the ending of the 6 consciousness. The 6 consciousness makes up the whole world, the whole realm of existence. And when the 6 consciousness stop, that is the state of nibbana. And here he's asking whether anything exists. And Sariputta said, don't say that. And then he said, that means nothing exists. And Sariputta said, also don't say that. And then he said, then both something exists and does not exist. And then Venerable Sariputta said, don't say that again. And neither also don't say that. So, you see, in the sutta, the Buddha said there are 2 extremes, the annihilationist view and the eternalist view. If you say nothing exists in the state of parinibbana, then the Buddha said you are an annihilationist. You say nothing exists. If you say something exists, then in the state of nibbana, the Buddha said you are an eternalist. So it is very dangerous to say something exists and something does not exist. But then in the Digha Nikaya, there is a sutta where the Buddha said the Tathagata is designated by the Dhamma body, Dhammakaya, Brahma body, Brahmakaya. Dhamma become Dhammavuddho, Brahma become Brahmavuddho. And so the ultimate state, the Buddha didn't say that nothing exists. He also didn't say that something exists, but he said that actually that the Tathagata is profound, immeasurable, unfathomable like the ocean. This is mentioned in Majjhima Nikaya 72. And this ultimate state, which the body calls, the Buddha calls the Brahma body, or the Brahma become, the Hindus call it Brahma, and also call it Atman. And I believe that those holy men who have reached a very high level, they understand that this ultimate state, but they always say that it is something that cannot be actually described. That's why the Buddha calls it the unconditioned, the uncreate, using all negative terms, because it cannot be perceived by the mind, it cannot be cognized by the mind, it can only be attained. So, because this is something that is that we cannot know unless our mind stops working. Because as long as our mind is working, that means our active mind, the world exists. But it's only when the active mind stops, there is a type of consciousness which the Buddha calls the unsupported consciousness in our suttas, and which may be similar to what the Hindus call awareness, pure awareness. But then, as is mentioned in this sutta, this is a very delicate subject, and sometimes people, including monks, and can come to great differences and come to have very strong views, and can even split the sangha when we have fixed views about this. So it's very dangerous. So it's best if we approach this subject very carefully and not to say that something exists or nothing exists. 4.18.175. The Venerable Upavana came to visit the Venerable Sariputta, etc., and said this to him: "Pray, Sariputta, your reverence, is there an end maker by knowledge?" Stop here for a while. End maker is antakaro. That means one who has made an end, which is basically an arahant. And then Venerable Sariputta said, "Not in this case, your reverence." And then Venerable Upavana said again, "Then, your reverence, is there an end maker by conduct?" "Not in this case, your reverence." "Then is there an end maker by knowledge and conduct?" "Not in this case, your reverence." "What then, your reverence? Is there an end maker by any other way than knowledge and conduct?" "Not in this case, your reverence." "Sariputta, your reverence, when asked, is there any end maker by knowledge, by conduct, by knowledge and conduct, and is there any other way, you reply, "Not in this case, your reverence." "In what way then, your reverence, is there an end maker?" And Venerable Sariputta said, "Your reverence, if there were an end maker by knowledge, he would still be an end maker with grasping, or with basis, savu padano. If there were one by conduct, by knowledge and conduct, he would still be an end maker with grasping. If, your reverence, there were an end maker by any other way than by knowledge and conduct, then the ordinary man would be an end maker. Now, your reverence, the ordinary man living apart from knowledge and conduct, being unversed in conduct, knows not, sees not things as they really are. But if he be practiced in conduct, he knows, he sees things as they really are. So knowing, so seeing, he is an end maker." In this sutta, Venerable Sariputta says that there is basically no end maker, no arahant, because if you say that there is an end maker or an arahant, then there would still be a basis for rebirth. In other words, this teaching here is a bit similar to some teachings by some Hindu saints, namely that there is no person to be liberated. If we think that there is a person to be liberated, then we don't understand. That is why sometimes some people, they think that they are already an Arya, and they think, "I have become an Arya." But Arya does not think that I have become an Arya. He just knows that there is attainment, and he's not eager also for others to know. Nowadays, sometimes some people think that they are Arya, and they are very eager for other people to know. And if other people don't accept, don't believe that they are Aryas, then they get very annoyed. And that just proves that they are not Arya. So here we have to know basically there is nothing to attain. There is, just as long as our mind is working, we think there is a self. We think that we have to strive to get out of samsara. All this striving to get out of samsara is still in that realm of delusion. But then we still have to strive. Only thing is, sometimes when we strive too hard, we don't get to see things as they really are. One of the important qualities on the holy path is upekkha, equanimity. It's only when the mind is calm and equanimous, not agitated, that we see things as they really are. Today we come to Sutta number 4.18.179. Now the Venerable Ananda went to visit the Venerable Sariputta, and on coming to him, greeted him courteously. As he sat at one side, the Venerable Ananda said this to the Venerable Sariputta. Pray, Sariputta, your reverence, what is the reason, what is the cause, why certain beings in this world are not fully set free in this very life? In this matter, Ananda, your reverence, beings do not understand as it really is. This perception partakes of worsening. They do not understand as it really is. This perception partakes of stability. They do not understand as it really is. This perception partakes of distinction. They do not understand as it really is. This perception partakes of penetration. This, your reverence, is the reason, this is the cause why some beings in this world are not fully set free in this very life. And Venerable Ananda again asked, but pray, Sariputta, your reverence, what is the reason, what is the cause why certain beings in this world are fully set free in this very life? In this matter, your reverence, beings do understand as it really is. This perception partakes of worsening. This perception partakes of distinction. This perception partakes of stability, and this perception partakes of penetration. This is the reason why certain beings are set free in this very life. Now that's the end of this sutta. Now according to the Digha Nikaya, sutta number 34, this sutta refers to 4 kinds of concentration. And this is also explained in the Visuddhimagga. In the Visuddhimagga, it says that of these forms of concentration, the partaking of worsening or decline is due to the frequent arising of opposing states, which means the hindrances probably. Then the partaking of stability is due to the persistence of that mindfulness which is in conformity with concentration. The partaking of distinction is due to the attainment of a higher distinctive state, which probably means the jhanas. And the partaking of penetration is due to the promptings of perception and attention associated with disgust. That means this is more of getting insight. So you have disgust and dispassionateness. So from here you can see that when we practice meditation, we have to go through these 4 states. The state of worsening, which is the initial stage. In our meditation, our concentration is not stable. So sometimes you progress, sometimes you regress. Sometimes you progress, you take 1 step forward and then later you take 2 steps back. Sometimes you take 3 steps forward and then you take 1 step back, like that. So this is the worsening stage. Then later you come to the 2nd stage of stability, where you can get into a tranquil state. Every time you meditate, every time you sit down, you, because of experience, you are able to bring your mind down into a tranquil state so that you can use it. Then the 3rd one is distinction, that means you achieve a state of distinction. And this should refer to the jhanas, the one-pointedness of mind. In the monk's precepts, there is 1 precept in the parajikas, the very heaviest offenses for a monk, where if a monk does not have supernormal attainments and he claims to have supernormal attainments, then he is parajika, he is no more a monk. And in this definition of supernormal attainments, 1 is Arya stages. That means he's not an Arya, he claims to be an Arya. 2nd one, he does not have psychic power, he claims to have psychic power. Another one is he does not have jhana and he claims to have jhana. That means he purposely, willfully lies. So because of that definition of supernormal states, jhanas is a state of supernormal attainment, a state of distinction. That's why here it should refer to the jhanas. And then the last one is the perception of this penetration. That means he gets insight as a result of the one-pointedness of mind. So we have to go through these 4 states to get liberation in this very life. So here you can see the importance of both samatha and vipassana in the liberation of a person.